Yeah, so I've been grateful recently. I've gotten to do some pretty crazy characters. I do a character for a video game called League of Legends. His name is Heimerdinger. And that's the most fun I get to have because it tends to be what I wanted to do, which is, brains, bronze, the power of silence. And he's this crazy little character. But beyond that, mostly I'm doing a version of my own voice because I do a lot of teenager roles in anime or in whatever. So I did a Saturday morning cartoon back when there was a kids WB. To me, that was the big moment of like, oh man, to be a Saturday morning cartoon, which is not really a thing anymore. So I was the voice.
Oh, it's so weird. I just looked at that. I looked at that the other day on YouTube, and it's like 70s and 80s cartoons, man. Like, remember what a big deal that was? It was like they used to have in the fall, for those of you that don't remember or are younger, man, when fall television came out and you get like the fall TV guide, fall preview edition, and then also the major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS would have like these little specials that would happen on either, it would be like one Thursday night or a Friday night or something. It'd be like an hour-long preview talking about what was going to be coming out for Saturday morning stuff for the fall. And oh my gosh, I just loved it. Loved it. But it doesn't exist.
Nope.
It doesn't exist anymore, man.
Yeah.
What show was that, Jason? Because I remember like either the day we met or right before we met, somebody was like, "Yeah, he's the voice of." What show was that?
It was Joe in Beautiful Joe.
Beautiful Joe.
I don't know if that's what they're referring to, but yeah. So I was.
What was the premise of the show? What was the premise of the show?
It was based on a video game called Beautiful Joe, and it's this teenage kid whose girlfriend gets kidnapped and taken into movie land. And so Joe goes in after her, and it's all these, the typical trope movies that, the Western or the, in Italy, whatever. So he kind of goes in and he has to battle the monsters of movie land to save his girlfriend. And then he's, Captain Blue is the hero that he admires. He's always watched his movies. So Joe is the skater kid who's like, hey man, I'm Joe and my girlfriend got kidnapped. Tension to go, baby. That was his voice. And it was great. So we did it for one season and we're like, this is awesome. And then the directors had done Power Rangers and all these other shows where they're like, yeah, those shows were meh. And they ended up being, they ended up lasting and like, this show's really great. And then Kids WB, the execs are like, we don't want Kids WB anymore. Get it out of here. We want the CW.
Wow, man, what
that must have been it, because that was like, I think you did that like a year before we met. So that
yeah, it was right before. You're right, because it was 2006, I think, and I think I jumped into the Oasis a year after that, or ish.
How's it feeling from that? Because we've all, I think that we've all had those experiences where you think like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like it's gonna totally go. I remember having years ago, I got cast for a series of it was going to be Toyota. It was going to be Toyota commercials. So it was like 18 Toyota commercials, and it was going to play during NFL season. It was just like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. I worked with Gary Anthony Williams, who's a comedian that's in a bunch of stuff, and this other talented guy, Frank Noon, and it was like supposed to be like, this is it, guys. They're showing it. NFL is completely connected with this. And I remember I got the call from my agent, and I broke down in tears because in my mind, with the timing of what it was, I thought to myself, I've just made $250,000. That's literally what I thought. And my agent was like, it couldn't happen to a better guy. We're so happy for you. Anyway, we start ending up showing up. We start showing up on the set to do these things. And I start noticing like, we're doing all of the commercials very, very fast, right? It's like you start kind of going, wait a minute, this isn't like a regular commercial. Like a regular commercial, when you do a 30-second spot, it's an entire day, right? We're cranking out like 4 or 5 of these a day, right? I'm like kind of going, what's going on? And they're like not focusing really much. They're like doing quick things. Anyway, it turns out that these spots were not 30-second spots. They were like these little 45-second little sponsored hits that they were doing once a week during Sunday Night Football as like a little thing, like in between the halftime shows, like hey, and now for this week's Toyota NFL thing, and then they go to like a little 45-second commercial. So when it does that, the money goes way down. So it's 18 spots, right? So it was like, and it was supposed to be $250,000. It basically turned into about $18,000. Still not bad, but it was still like, and we'd have to come, you'd see a bunch of people, new actors would show up for every single spot, and they would see us going, oh man, congratulations, this must be amazing. And like, as the week went on, you went, yeah, it's not going to be that, right? It's not going to be that. So
yeah, well, and to your point, I think that's where the three of us, having worked for a theme park, you learn pretty quickly, like things come and go. And I feel like, a lot of people will either diss it or they'll whatever, but I feel like it's a great training ground for, like, you just don't know. You don't know what's around the bend. And I think we saw this happen to our colleagues. Paul, I don't know if were you, Paul, you were actually in the Aladdin musical, weren't you?
I wasn't. No.
You weren't. Okay. I didn't think so, but I didn't want to assume. But I was going to say that I think that hit people very hard because it was
and
great...
tell people exactly what happened with that.
So there was the Aladdin Musical Spectacular, which had gone on for, I think, 10 years, if not more. It was the thing, and people loved it, and it was a great show. And people who went to the parks, the annual pass holders, thought it was amazing, and rightfully so. It was one of the best things Disney's done. And then one day, it went away. And that's happened to, I think, a number of the shows I've been in, at least, where there's someone shows up and it's like, hey, thanks for what you've done. We're going to close this.
Yes.
And as hard as that is, I think that for me, it taught me pretty early on, everything's kind of temporary. Like there's no guarantee that you're going to keep coming back. And for a lot of the folks who did that show, it was really brutal initially. And for some probably still is. But for, I think, others, it then opened up the door to go do other things. And that's, we'll often joke that working at theme parks, I would say the same for people who do extra work or people who do stand-in work. It's what we call the golden handcuffs. And it's so close to what you want to be doing. And it can groom you for that. And it can be fun. It can be great. But at some point, you have to be very intentional. Is that what you want to do?
Correct.
Or not? And for a lot of people, they don't have that moment of intentionality. And they go like, oh, it's easy. I'm here. And then they put their worth in it and their life in it. So then when it doesn't work out, it's crushing. Versus what I've always tried to do, I don't know if it was smart, but it was always keep it at arm's length and be like, I love this. I love going to work, but I have to keep it at arm's length. Yes. That way I continue to pursue the things that I want to be doing outside of it. Mm-hmm. And if someday that turns and that changes and I want to be here full time, then I'll deal with that then. But for now, I want to be careful not to get the golden handcuffs, because for me, I always was aware that it was a good stepping stone, not my goal. So all that to say, I think that then prepared me for the moments when a cartoon goes away or an entire network in that case went away, just because you don't know.
Yeah, I will say it's such a fine balance, right? Because you're trying to do one of two things. You're not trying to live your life in like constant fear that everything is gonna go away in a second. So you're living in this constant state of panic, because I've seen people like that over the years. And then the other side of it, with what you're talking about with these golden handcuffs jobs, which I've seen the other side of that too. Like people think like, oh, you know what? This will always be here. This will always be here, and I'll always be able to do that. Listen, man, commercials were one of those things where it was like union commercial work. It looked like, especially when I got into it in the late 90s and early 2000s, that looked like something was like, oh, you could do this for decades, right? And then stuff completely changes, like the marketplace completely changes. Or how many times do we see this over the years with people that we've known that have performed at the amusement parks, where they go, yeah, you know what, that's okay. This is a good life. I'll be able to be here and all this stuff. And to your point, Jason, things change. All of a sudden they're starting to look for different types of people, or certain shows that you thought were always going to be there just aren't, or a pandemic happens and there is none of that all of a sudden, and going, what do I do? And I think it has to be in this state of coming back to the earlier thing that we talked about, is like, you just have to be in the present. You have to be in this moment and thinking a little bit about, what could happen. What am I trying to go for? What's my intentionality here? I think that I would say this, if your intention is to go, you know what, I just want to be comfortable and let me just do that, I think that that's a little bit of a warning bell, I think. I think for me
I think so too. I mean, I've run the risk of being, I don't know if we'll see if it's a risk or not, of being more adventurous. And so I haven't done the comfortable thing because I think I'm afraid of just, again, getting trapped in the golden handcuffs. So my life's been very squirrely, and there's been a lot of weeks of like, oh, am I going to get paychecks? But it's all worked out, and it's been exciting to see the experiences and the opportunities that I've had as a result of that. So some of my favorite books, there's a book called The Alchemist, which I think does a lot with that. If anyone who's listening or watching has not read it, The Alchemist is an amazing book about that very idea of going after your quote unquote personal legend or your dreams. And again, the pros and cons that come with that, like it doesn't come without cost. So I tend to be one who tries to kind of go after a life that is with as few regrets as possible, as opposed to like, oh, cool, I just want to make a lot of money and be famous. And that's the other thing is working with celebrities for 20 years. Most of them, you can tell they're very unhappy. And so for me, thinking, oh, cool, what I need in order to prove myself and be successful and to be happy is to be this very successful actor. Well, I went and met a bunch of successful actors and found out, ooh, that doesn't seem to be, doesn't work.
I know, right? We
So,
happen to meet a lot of these people too, because you've also done work with the Emmys and the Academy Awards and all this other stuff. So you're right in the mix with these folks, right?
yeah, so you learn. And I think it's, yeah, to your point earlier, it's a matter of then what do you do with that information, and what do you want your life to look like and be like, and what does it look like to have few regrets, et cetera, et cetera. So
No, I absolutely agree with that. I really, really do.
And to your point about earlier, we talked about kind of Sabbath rest as well as even the pandemic. I think that's, I don't know about you two. I know that Paul, your daughter's career is blowing up, but for you guys, I don't know how it was with COVID, but I think for a lot of us as creatives, when everything kind of stopped, here was this thing that we all loved and found a lot of joy in, as well as I even kind of worth in some ways that are actually positive. And that went out the window for a lot of people. And I think that was very hard. And I think that some people didn't fully deal with the repercussions of that. And I think others then took it and were like, okay, what can I do in this season? What can I do while I wait? And I think it's a big lesson for me too, is what do we do when we can't do the things we love, or when we're in a period of waiting? And you can either just sit around and complain and write nasty things on Facebook, or you can actually use that time, hopefully beneficially, which I think I saw both of you guys do over the course of the last year and a half.